Welcome, everybody, to the Winner's Circle Sports Betting Channel. I'm your host, Ross Benjamin. It is Tuesday, November the 7th. It's the afternoon here on the East Coast. On the West Coast, it's around noon Eastern time, and that's where one of my guests is. And I don't have no idea what time it is in Mexico, Paul. But, guys, how are you? And, Paulie, how are you? Let me ask you a question. What time is it in Mexico? I don't even know.
Right now it's 2 o'clock. Normally I would do this show at 1 p.m., but we don't honor daylight savings time. So when you guys flip the clock back, this show just got an hour later. So a little bit discombobulated now, but we're ready to roll and we'll still pick winners no matter what time it is.
There you go, Chipper. It doesn't usually honor any time. So it doesn't matter if they turn the clock back or not. Since he's been a kid, he turns the clocks back himself at 73 years old and still kicking strong and still picking damn winners, 74. Right now, Chipper, number one on the 7-day board, number one in money earned on the 30-day board, number one in money earned on the 60-day board, and number two since the site's inception to another guy on the show that's talking as we speak. And Paul, by the way, number two in the last 7 days with a solid 5-2 record. Chipper, how are you?
I'm great. As long as I can start with my first game of the weekend, which was my game of the year, Clemson, and then I can have my final Monday night winner with the Chargers. But in between, K-Poots stunk. Terrible. Actually, a bad weekend except for the two big winners. And I do hang my hat on the game of the year, which won easily. Clemson romped over Notre Dame. So it's a mixed bag for me over the weekend, but the big games continue to prevail.
Yeah, and, it goes to show you, even though how well Chipper's doing, it goes to show you, folks, we don't win all the time. And just because we had a bad week, it's about making money over the long haul. So if you soured on Chip after just 3 days, shame on you, because the guy's been making a ton of money over the last 60 days. And, we've been making a ton of money over our careers, and that's why we're still doing it for as long as we're doing it. All right, let's get to the games at hand. We're talking NFL today, but before we get to those, just a couple notes here, folks. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please take a second to do so. You'll see a WC logo in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you're on your PC, if you're on your mobile device or smart TV, there's a black subscribe button right underneath your box there. Just click on that. It's absolutely free to do so. There's no hidden agenda. There's no sneaky tricks. It's just you're privy to the best sports betting podcast on the internet today. And then I'm going to ask you to do one step further. If you have subscribed already or you haven't and you're new, take a second or two to do so, folks. Go into your YouTube settings and click on that alert notification bell for the Winner's Circle Sports Betting channel. And you'll be notified immediately upon us releasing any of these great podcasts on the channel. All right, Paulie, you just brought it to my attention today, and it dawned on me just before we came on there. I keep sticking you with the Baltimore Ravens games, but for whatever reason, it's not by intent. But, this is a competitive matchup. One that a lot of people are looking forward to, Baltimore and Cleveland, because you got a Cleveland Browns team that's, I think, very underrated defensively. Unless you look at their statistics, just the casual observer doesn't realize how good this Browns defense is. And talking about great defenses, the Baltimore Ravens have one of themselves. Right now, Baltimore is a 6-point home favorite. The total is 37.5. Paul is opened at 39.5. What do you got for us?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I am 7-2 with these free plays this year, but 1-2 with Raven games. So what does that tell you? I'm not been great with the Baltimore Ravens, and I come off a shellacking last week as I thought Seattle would be competitive, but obviously that game fell apart. It was kind of close early. It was 7-0 with about 4 minutes to go in the half, and then the wheels fell off for the Seahawks, and lo and behold, they just got obliterated by these Ravens. But, the Ravens have been on offense inconsistent. Last week, they weren't great by any stretch of the means. Lamar Jackson, less than 200 yards of passing, but they ran for 298 yards. Two carries consisted of 102 of those yards, and Lamar had a 20-yard run in there as well. So they were effective running the ball, and they completely shut down Seattle, who had 100 and I think 60 yards, and they got 54 yards late. There was a long pass in there of 80. I think two completions accounted for 85 yards. So they completely stymied Seattle. Now, this is a matchup of two defensive-minded teams. The Ravens are the best pass rushing team in the league if it's defined by number of sacks. They get to the quarterback. And the Browns, unfortunately, have lost two offensive linemen here. From the beginning of the year, they come into 2023 with one of the best offensive lines, and here they are down two very important players here. So I think they're going to have trouble moving the ball. Now, last week against Arizona, I believe they ran the ball 34 times and didn't even pick up 100 yards. They did move the ball when it counted. They did move the ball through the air. Watson had a respectable game, but I could see this game for sure going to the low side of the total. I think the initial move was correct. I could see Cleveland staying close. The Ravens have not been prolific on offense in every game. They struggled out of the gate against the Texans. They were outgained in that one. And then throughout the course of the season against the Colts in that loss, they had a shade over 300. So I could see this game going definitely to the low side of the total, and that's where I'm going with this.
All right, Cleveland and Baltimore under the total of 37 for Mr. Paul Bovi. And considering he's 6-0 on his free picks on all games not involving Baltimore, we won't assign him a Baltimore game for the rest of the year. You know, the problem is me and Chip trying to catch up here. So Chip called me the other day and says, keep giving him the Baltimore games, Ross. Anyway, Chipper, look at Baltimore 4-0 their last four and winning by over 20 points a game.
Yeah.
Their last two at home, they're averaging 32.5 points per game, 411 points, during that 4-game win streak, a little over 32 points per game, 411 yards per game. Their last two at home, Chip, 515 yards and 508 yards versus Seattle and Detroit. Paulie went under. And usually that's what your mindset is, a team that's on an offensive roll like Baltimore like that, and you're only putting out a total of 37. But what say you on this matchup?
Well, you know, despite those huge offensive numbers that the Ravens put up the last couple of weeks, when you look at this game, my first instinct is defense. First thing I think of for both clubs would be defense, particularly the Browns, who, like you said, have such difficulties running the ball right now, which, you know, kind of surprising because I thought that would be part of their main game. But I think the under is the side as well. With this number coming out as low as it does is an indication. But the Ravens have the biggest point differential of any team in the NFL right now. That's margin of victory and total points compared to points allowed. So, you know, they're really tough right now. And Jackson seems to have really put it together, not running as much, but seems to be so much more accurate with his passing. And that may throw a wrench into the total. But I think this game is supposed to stay under. I think when you look at these two teams, that's the first thing I think of is gravitating to a grind it out, a tough game.
Yeah, the point per game differential. And like I alluded to during this current 4-game win streak, 20.3 points per game. They're outscoring their opponents. So your point's well taken. You know, Paul, I'm looking at this Baltimore team, and since you've had a chance to cover them recently a lot, they're starting to resemble to me that Baltimore team of a few years ago. There was the number one. They started the year like 1-2, and they finished 14-2, and then they got knocked off in the first round of the playoffs. I'm not implying that they're going to get knocked out early in the playoffs this year. What I'm implying, there's a lot of resembling factors. You got a team with a real good running game. You got a team with a dominant defense. You got a quarterback that's driving defensive coordinators crazy in preparation to how to handle them. Do you see the same thing I'm seeing in terms of the resemblance of that squad compared to this one?
Well, let me just say this, because I did not make this point during the analysis, and that is Mark Andrews was very active on Sunday. He caught 9 passes and 10 targets, and he's still not getting the ball downfield. I think at some point they're going to run into a team that can defend the tight end properly. Now, Odell Beckham had probably his best game. He caught 5 for 56 yards. He hadn't done much coming in, but I still think that the offense is limited. And yeah, I could see your point there, because this is a defensive team. Offensively, okay, they have compiled that point differential basically against 2 teams, and that was against the Lions, where Detroit was a absolute no-show, and this past week against Seattle, where they just fell apart in the second half. The Seahawks did. Turnovers didn't help. So outside of those 2 games, there's been a 22-19 against the Texans. They were trailing. I think in the first half, it was a close game, and then you had the Steeler game at 17-10. So this is a defensive-minded team that they'll be made or broken by how the defense performs, because I don't think their offense can carry them through.
Yeah, Chipper, if you recall, we were doing shows together back then, and I was always I was on an island where I had concerns with Baltimore in terms of how deep they would go in the playoffs that year. Right. And I didn't predict they'd go out in the first round, but my thought process was I didn't see them going to the Super Bowl, because I just don't think offensively you could threaten teams on a consistent basis when your tight end is your number 1 target. You need that consistent threat vertically. And I know people will bring up Travis Kelce. The bottom line with him is, how good has Kansas City's offense been this year without that game breaker like Tyreek Hill that they had? They've definitely taken a step back. And then you can go to San Francisco with George Kittle. Yeah, but look at his surrounding cast. The wide receivers that San Francisco has, with the ability, several, to stretch the field vertically. I don't know, Chip. Can you win with this style over the long haul?
Well, when your tight end is your leading receiver and your leading rushing back is your quarterback, in the playoffs, it seems like teams can adjust and really put the Ravens in a bad spot. They haven't been able to win in the playoffs. They've adjusted to Jackson, and I think that's pretty much the problem with that team. This year, it may be a little different. They seem, but then again, Ross, they seem to have that same kind of mojo they had years ago, like you said. And the playoffs are a whole different animal, and it just seems like Jackson's different in the playoffs, and so are the Ravens. So we're going to have to wait and see toward the end of the year what happens there. But like I said, that Raven team, defense first, their best running backs, their quarterback, and their leading receivers at tight end. I think that can be defensed in the long run.
Yeah, and they won 28-3 at Cleveland earlier this year, but Deshaun Watson was not the quarterback in that game. Right. It was P.J. Walker. So I believe. I know it wasn't Deshaun Watson.
It was actually Dorian. I think it was Dorian Robinson that game.
Oh, okay, wow. The rookie. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Because now that I remember, because I was on that game, and I remember them making the announcement 45 minutes before game time that Watson wasn't a go, and that line shifted dramatically. Anyway, Paul, tell the folks a little bit about what you foresee coming up over the weekend in football this week, and how you've been doing of late. Anything worth noting?
Yeah, we swept the college board last week, and I mentioned that if it got out there on Tuesday and you picked this up before these MAC games went off, that I was in on a 10-dime play, and it was Toledo, and we got the cover over Buffalo. So that one worked out. And then later in the week on Saturday, a couple winners with Oklahoma State and the UCLA game over. And the other MAC game was Ball State plus the 4.5 And it was fortunate, although we had a 2-0 turnover deficit. So I've got 3 MAC plays up tonight, Tuesday, if you happen to pick this up when it comes out. But I know I will have a huge play in the Big 12. I've already played it. I didn't write it up yet, but I will imminently. And I think this is a great spot for what has been a disappointing team. I think we can get an upset here, take points, win the game, and I'm going to roll with that. In the NFL, unfortunately, we were only 1-2 on Sunday. We had 2 disappointing losses. I won't go into them, but we'll get that straightened out on Sunday. And yeah, we're going to win. We had a nice 5-2 week, and we're going to continue the winning as this week rolls on.
Very good. Paul Bovi, big play in college football on Saturday in the Big 12. The guy knocks them dead with his MAC picks. He's got 3 going for tonight. That's if you see this video in time, Tuesday evening. There's 3 games in the MAC on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday. And again, Paul is like the rest of us. All his picks are guaranteed. So if you purchase from Paul a single game, multi-game daily package, or any subscription plan of 30 days or fewer, if he does not make you a profit, which is highly unlikely, but it happens, you will be guaranteed to get your account credited back the exact amount you paid for that specific purchase. All right, Chipper. Interesting game here. Real good one, as a matter of fact. I mean, yeah, San Francisco at Jacksonville. I thought of you when I gave this, when I had to do the assignments on these games. I says, this is right up Chip's alley. We got a San Francisco team that's lost 3 in a row, failed to cover 3 straight, scored 17 points on each occasion, and they're a road favorite, a 3-point road favorite against a team that's 5-0 straight up in ATS in their last 5.
Right.
And the total in this game, Chipper, if I could find it correctly here, it's 45.5. I don't know. Maybe you want to go with the total because something tells me you're going to be using this game on Sunday, but we'll, again, let you talk.
Well, San Francisco, as we know, started out 5-0, and they were everyone's choice to just ramble on through the NFC and end up going to the Super Bowl. But in those 5 victories on Ross, they scored 30, 30, and 30, the first 3, then 35 and 42 when they annihilated Dallas 42-10. We all remember that. Since then, they've dropped 3 straight, and they've only scored 17, 17, and 17 in each one of those games. Now they come up with a 45.5, which is the highest total the Niners have seen for the entire year. So after scoring 17, 17, and 17, and this total coming up this high, I'm gravitating toward the total to go over. Now, Brock Purdy, people are starting to question him and what's going on, his ability. Not only did he get hurt, but, he was 95%, 70%, 70%. He's threw in a 44% clinker against Cleveland in the game they got beat. And he came back in the game he got hurt at 71% completions. But is this totaling points? They're a different team without Debo in the lineup. And McCaffrey was gimping a little bit, though he did come back and play last week. The Niners are 4-0 lifetime against the Jaguars. And you want to do a little comparison. The Niners are the number 4 offense in the league, 377 yards a game. And the defense for the Jaguars is not that impressive, number 23, allowing 343. And on offense, the Jaguars move up to 14th, which is still the middle of the pack. And on defense, the Niners are still 49th, at 10th, rather, at 315 yards. But I think here that the Niners are going to look to move the ball and get something going. I think Jacksonville's defense is a little bit more vulnerable than we realized because that 6-2 record is really glittering. And, like you said, they've won their last 5, and they've covered all 5 of these games. So, Jacksonville's in a spot. They're getting points at home, which seems to be the question you were really bringing up, Ross, is how could they be an underdog in this situation against a team that's lost 3 in a row? But, it's just, I think this game goes over the total. Niners are 1-3 against a number on the road, though they're 2-2. And, I just think I think I see this game going over the total. I'm a little skeptical of what's going on with Jacksonville. Lawrence has thrown 6 touchdown passes, only 2 INTs in the last 5 games, whereas Purdy has thrown 3 TD passes and 5 INTs. So maybe the shine and the hone is off Purdy here, but I'm expecting them to bounce back and put a good offensive effort together. And I think with Lawrence, Jacksonville will put up enough points. I think this game goes over the total, and I think it goes over easy. And I think that number 45.5 is the indicator that the odds maker thinks this is a high scoring game.
Yeah, and especially in light of all the unders we've been seeing. I was talking to Paul off air, Chipper. Games have played 81, 53, and 2 to the under this year. That's 60.4%, which is astronomically high by total standards and splits. And, we've completed 9 weeks of action so far. And, since week 3, the totals of 46 or greater, 18 and 5 to the under. This one isn't 46 yet. It's 45.5, but Chipper makes a compelling case. Paul, I see Jacksonville as a fraud. I do. Similar to Pittsburgh. And one of the things that I look at is yard per game differential. This is a team that's 6-2, yet they've averaged 341 yards a game and given up 342. So they're a minus yard per game differential. And then their point per game differential, despite this 5-game winning streak, despite a 6-2 record, their point per game differential is only plus 4.6. To me, I look at stuff like that when I'm looking at false favorites, which isn't the case here, or a team I think is a fraud, which is the case here. But what's your thoughts?
I don't think they're a fraud. And I think the 49ers problems stem not only from the absence of Debo, but possibly even more so from the absence of left tackle. They're all pro left tackle. And he is a difference maker. And they've gotten more pressure on Brock Purdy. So you combine the absence of the wide receiver along with an offensive lineman that's critical to their blocking. And now they have another one. I think it's their right guard who is questionable for Sunday. I think that's something you have to look at before diving into this game. Now, on the surface, it opened up at 44.5. And when I looked at the number, I thought this is low. So the odds maker, I think, kind of got this one wrong, and it crossed a very important threshold at 45, because to me, 45 is a number that I'll even sometimes buy down to if it's 45.5, because I want that 24-21 push. Yeah. So I don't think Jacksonville's a fraud. I think they've gotten better on offense, but I also think the caliber of their competition certainly must be considered. They play in a very weak division. They just came off a game with Pittsburgh recently where I had a big play on the Jaguars. And we all know the Steelers don't move the ball that much. And, now this is clearly a step up in class. So I would agree with Chip, and I would go over the number.
Yeah, I mean, I still contend that they're a fraud, okay? And the record's probably not going to show it at the year's end because of the division they play in. But when I see differentials that I just mentioned, I think they're a fraud. I think Pittsburgh's a fraud because at what are they now, 5-3? And there's no way they're as good as their record is. So go ahead, Chip.
I was going to say Pittsburgh's been outgained in every game this year, every game, and you have 5 wins. But this Lawrence has thrown to a passer rating of over 100 in 5 of the last 6 games, and the one time it was under was at 91. So I think Jacksonville may be able to move the ball through the air. Well, it's going to be an interesting matchup because of Jacksonville being 6-2 and the Niners coming in with 3 straight losses. So I'm looking for a lot of fireworks.
Yeah, the over. And I don't disagree with the total pick, Chip. I'm talking long term here.
Yeah,
I'm getting away from the kind of conversation of us focusing just on this specific matchup when I make those comments that I did. And the other thing is with San Francisco. I mean, look. I've been professing this since I've been doing these shows 3 years ago. If you want to be successful as a sports bettor, part of the equation is thinking like an odds maker. And when I trust the odds makers unequivocally. I don't fear them, but I respect them. And if you don't respect the odds maker, that's your first mistake, because you're never going to be smarter than an odds maker. Trust me. Okay. So
I don't
when I
know that
see,
I don't agree with that. I think the odds
okay,
makers. I just want to just chime in on this. I think the odds makers make mistakes, and that's how you win. Odds
yeah,
makers put up bad numbers, and it doesn't happen a lot. But
Right.
when they put up a bad number, you have to be able to jump in and have confidence in the fact that you believe that your opinion is better than that of the odds maker. I think they get it right like 95% of the time. That's why when they put up a number, it usually doesn't move much. But you
all right.
sometimes
Well,
see these totals, they will move around dramatically after they are posted.
all right. I'm referring to sides mostly
Okay.
when I make that comment, and my retort to that is quite simple. Okay, fair enough if they're right 90 or 95% of the time. So I'm basing my opinion on the 90-95% of the
Okay.
time that they're right.
Right.
Okay. Is that okay? So having said that, when I see a team that's lost 3 in a row, struggling to score uh, beside that, and they're a favorite on the road against a team that has a better record, has won 5 straight games, and has won 5 against the spread. Would you agree that part of the odds maker's success in sportsbook success is preying on bettors' emotion and what they remember short term?
Right.
And that's where my thinking goes. And I've done very well with this kind of thinking. It's not totally how I handicap, but in this particular instance, I think they're begging you to take the home underdog in this situation. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Now, if you would have asked me if this question would have came up 3 weeks ago in this matchup, first of all, if the game was played 3 weeks ago, the Jaguars would be, I would say, somewhere between a 5.5 and 6 point dog instead of a 3 point dog.
Right.
Again, based on perception. So, yeah, Paul, good point from your standpoint. And again, I'll tell you, Chipper likes to tell me when I got a 95% angle that 5% of the time I'm wrong. Okay. So if they're 95% right on an accurate line that they set, whether it be a side or a total, 5% of the time they're wrong. And a guy like you, who's very sharp, is going to spot that. And good points on both sides is what I'd like to say there. So Chipper, tell the folks, I already mentioned how well you've been doing.
Right.
Tell the folks how, what's
Well,
going on.
okay, well, I had my second game of the year that I posted, and Clemson won easy over Notre Dame right from the beginning. And of course, my standalone games Thursday, Sunday, and Monday have been outrageous. We had another big winner with San Diego, when I'm pretty sure most of Las Vegas, most of the experts out here were looking for the Jets to come up with a big effort. But they didn't, and we won that one. But I have another game of the year. Now, remember, last year we were 9-1 with these games. I have another one this weekend, and this won't be early. Like last week, I told you I had an early game. This is not an early game, so you don't have to worry about getting in before the game starts. But I've got a game of the year on Saturday, and of course, we're looking to bounce back in the NFL on Sunday. I really like the card. It was kind of funny. I know Paul had Oklahoma State, and I had the other side because I saw so much gravitation toward the Cowboys, and I said they're winning, they're going here, and I thought people were sloughing Oklahoma off like they didn't count. That was my big mistake over the weekend, because I really thought the Sooners were the side, and Paulie had a best bet with Oklahoma State. So way to go there, Paul. But I'm looking to come back with another game of the year Saturday, and I don't think this one's going to be close. I love it. I really like it. And you know how successful we've been with those. And of course, on Sunday we'll have our Fab Five for you.
Yeah, Chip started out his career with the company called the A Play. Right. And he could go in depth about that forever and a day. But to make a long story short, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chip, him and his partner at that time, basically they used to have privy to some of the parlay sheets or parlay cards, and they would go through them, and they would come up with the play the general public was all over, and they'd go the opposite way. Or,
for the most part.
For the most part, or they isolated one game they liked a lot, and it was called the A Play. Well, now he calls it his Megabucks play. Right. And I can tell you from experience working with them in the times we've been associated with each other, he does very, very well with those mega bucks plays. And last week was a perfect example. Clemson against Notre Dame. Clemson downtrodden this year, had 3 losses going in. No aspirations of a national title, no aspirations of even winning the ACC. And they pretty much dominated Notre Dame when it came down to it. So good call there, Chipper.
Well,
All
it was
right,
pretty much their Super Bowl, Ross.
Yeah,
It was, Clemson playing Notre Dame at home. That was virtually their Super Bowl after what they had been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So great call, by the way, and great call on Oklahoma State by Paul as well. I didn't use Oklahoma, but I had voiced my opinion on the show. I believe it was with you guys that I had a lean toward the Sooners too. Thankfully, I got off of them. In any event, all right, here's what I've been doing of late. I'm number 1 on the site since its inception. Cooled off a bit of late, but still some pretty good numbers, folks, when it's all said and done. My NFL since week 2, 26-17. College football 57-36 since December 2nd of last year. That's good for 61%. Since April the 12th of this year, my NBA 43-26. That's 62%. College football since college basketball, since March 10th of this year, 26-17. And since March the 11th, 2022, college basketball totals, folks, keep an eye on those. When I put them out, 65%, 46-27. All right, let me get to my game. And that's the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. The game will be played in Germany, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time kickoff. I'm glad to see that the field in Germany was a lot better conditioned than the ones they were playing on in London, which were like playing on cement. In any event, this is not going to be a game that's going to be on my premium card. I could tell you that right out, okay? I assigned it to myself early in the week because it was a competitive matchup with Indianapolis only being a 1.5-point favorite and 39. So I still, because I won't use it on my card, trust me, folks, I'm a very competitive guy. I want to win. All right. Indianapolis, they've been facing, they will be facing, I should say, their second straight anemic offensive team. Last week it was Carolina. Boy, oh boy, what you look at Bryce Young from Carolina, and then you look at the kid in Houston, and it's CJ Stroud, and it's like night and day, those 2 first-round picks. CJ Stroud has been outstanding. Bryce Young, I have no idea what they saw in him as a number 1 pick. The concern about his height, his lack of arm strength is all coming to fruition right now. In any event, it's not about that game. It's about this one. And they're going to be facing another anemic offensive team this week, New England. I mean, New England's only averaging 15 points per game, folks, averaging less than 290 yards per contest. They're 0-3 straight up in ATS in their last 3. They did not play in Foxborough. I know it's not a true away game, but they're not at home. Indianapolis, on the other hand, their dichotomies are weird. I mean, the Colts are 1-4 straight up at home. In games played away from Indianapolis, they're 3-1 straight up in ATS. Again, it's a neutral site game, but there's something to be said for those 2 statistics when you're not on your home field. This is also an Indianapolis team. I told you that New England has been anemic offensively. And Indianapolis is, even though they're just 4-5, they have an ability to put some points up offensively. They've scored 21 points or more in all 9 games this year. In New England, they've scored 17 points or fewer in 7 of their last 8 games. It won't be easy, okay? But I'm going to take the Indianapolis Colts as the lesser of 2 evils, -120 on the money line. Paulie?
All right, so when you look at the Colts, they gave up after the Tennessee game, which I believe they won 23-16. Hopkins had 8 receptions for $140, 37, 38, 39 points. Last week, it wasn't their offense that won the game. And as you mentioned, it was Bryce Young's interceptions. Kenny Moore returned 2 for touchdowns, 2 pick sixes in a game, but Carolina actually ran the ball against them 28 times for 140 yards. And so you can make an argument that their defense is definitely flawed. So where I'd go with this game is probably over the total, maybe even New England's team total over. I guess I should throw the towel in on Mac Jones. But given the fact that this defense has been problematic, the Colts has, and they're without Zaire Franklin on Sunday. He is the leading tackler in the league. He was out, and he may be out again this week, and that's something you should watch, because if he is out, he had over 100, by the way. They should be able to run the ball. Stevenson should have a big game, or at least a respectable game, along with Ezekiel Elliott. So I could see New England staying in this game, possibly winning it, and I could see the point total going over.
Okay, so Paulie doesn't agree with my pick, and it's okay, because I'm not crazy about it either. But by the same token, Indianapolis, you make a good point, Paul, because you look at their 3 games prior to the Carolina game, they gave up 37, 38, and 39 points. But, you look inside the numbers, and it's a little bit deceiving. They got torched in the one game, but the other 2 games, which they gave up those high point totals, it was more of a result of their offense turning the ball over and allowing the opposing offense to have short fields. And so we'll see. I mean, again, Carolina ran the ball for 140. They better do something right, because they got no passing game. But in any event, Paulie, again, he's got a lean toward the over 39. And I entertain that as one of my picks, as a pick on the show. But I went for, like I said, this is not a game I'm crazy about. But if you put the proverbial gun to my head, Chipper, I'm going to take Indianapolis minus 120.
Yeah, I hate these European games, not only because of the time start, but it's difficult to get a feel for teams that are both road teams virtually at the same time. The line on here a little bit surprised me that it was so low because of the ineptitude of the Patriots. Like you said, they're averaging less than 17 points a game. And I think of both these teams as defensive teams. The Patriots are just, they've been pitiful. They seem to be in positions at least to cover a number of these games. And then they come up with, a turnover or a penalty or something along the lines that'll ruin their drive or their chances to score. They just haven't been efficient at all. And it's an ugly game. I don't think I'm getting up this Sunday for it. I mean, we were happy enough. We were happy enough to play the under last week, because the game's starting 6:30 out here. Where you are, it's 9:30. It's decent, but after Saturday night, it's tough making it at 6:30 here in Las Vegas.
I tell you what, man, if they turn the clocks ahead 3 hours, I ain't getting up for this game. So, in any event, I'm looking here, 37, 39, 38 points, Paul. They gave up they gave up 354 yards to Jacksonville. That was a game they gave up 233 yards against Jacksonville in that 37-20 loss. Outgained them completely, but turned the ball over 4 times, to my point.
Yep.
The game against Cleveland, 39-38, they gave up 316 yards. They turned the ball over 4 times in that game. And really, the only game they got torched in that sequence was the home game against New Orleans, where they gave up 511 yards last week against Carolina, 275. I don't know if anybody can hang their hat on holding Carolina to under 300 yards, because they're just not very good, and especially offensively. So we'll see. Some pretty good takes there, fellas. Again,
this I will say, if you give up 511 yards to New Orleans, you got a problem, because New Orleans could barely move the ball against Chicago this week. So I do respect those points pertinent to the turnovers in those other 2 games. But I did see some inefficiencies on defense, and I really put a lot of stock in the fact that they've had cornerbacks go out this year, several of them. One went on the IR, and Brents has been hurt. And if Zaire Franklin is out, I would put a lot of weight in that. I believe he's worth 1.5 in the line.
Yeah, he was out last week too, but you can get away with that kind of loss against Carolina.
Right.
Yeah, but New England, I mean, again, I mean, we're not talking a team that's an offensive juggernaut, nor a team that's like that much better than Carolina. They're better, but by a long shot, I think that would be a stretch. So we'll see. In any event, Paulie likes the Ravens and the Browns to go under the total of 37.5. Chipper, he likes the 49ers and Jags over 45.5. And yours truly likes the Indianapolis Colts on the money line in that game in Germany against New England. Indianapolis right now is a minus 120 money line favorite. Folks, I thank you all for joining us today. And once again, fellas, it's always an honor and a privilege to do shows with you two gentlemen. I appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate the time and research you put in to help make this a fantastic podcast every Tuesday afternoon when we do it. Until the next time, for Chip Chirimbes and Paul Bovi and Ross Benjamin, take care and God bless, folks.